We're talking here about the lead in paint regulation, and who better to talk to us on this topic than Bobby Bugwandeen, who's the Deputy President of the South African Paint Manufacturing Association. Bobby, thanks so much for joining me here on Contemporary Business.
Thank you very much, Ivor. It's actually very good to be here.
When was this regulation finally published, Bobby?
After much deliberation, it was finally published on the 17th of May, 2024.
All right, so that's a very significant date because that's a starter date for this race towards a lead-managed, I don't want to say a lead-free, but a lead-managed manufacturing psyche here in South Africa. Am I right?
That's correct. It kicks off two timelines, a 12-month timeline and a 24-month timeline.
What are those two timelines for, Bobby?
So the 12-month timeline is the timeline for this to become the law. So 17th of May 2024, it has been published. 17th of May 2025, it becomes the law, which means that after the 17th of May 2025, you cannot produce any product that has more than 90 ppms of lead in your product. It is an absolute hard stop date that cannot be overlooked.
So this is critically important in terms of this first timeline. It is the date at which manufacturers have to stop manufacturing this product.
That's 100% correct.
This product being anything?
Anything that has more than 90 ppm of lead.
All right. So by the 17th of May 2025, anything with more than 90 ppm of lead cannot be manufactured thereafter.
That is correct.
And what is the second timeline that is kicked off?
The legislation makes provision for changes that needs to happen with regards to packaging and labeling out in the market, knowing that it is not a simple process to change labels with stock on hand, etc. So the second timeline is a 2-year timeline from date of publication, which is the 17th of May 2026, by which all packaging in South Africa regarding paints and coatings must be compliant to the lead regulations as published on the 17th of May 2024. The regulations stipulate basic things such as the brand name, trade name, where it's manufactured, date of manufacture, etc. And I think that's quite straightforward because most manufacturers do comply to those basic requirements of labeling. However, there is a new statement that needs to go onto every container that declares that this product actually complies to the South African regulation of 90 ppm or less lead in product. And that statement is the key thing to get onto your pack within 2 years' time.
In terms of labeling, can manufacturers use the terminology lead-free or no lead?
No longer. It used to be allowed in the past regulations where manufacturers trying to communicate the lead friendliness of products, without the stipulation by the department, have used statements like lead-free, lead-safe, etc. However, now it is stipulated that these statements are no longer allowed, and they have to be replaced with the lead compliance statement that is in the regulation.
So let's just summarize that very quickly. By the 17th of May, 2026, a label on the product will have to read that this product contains 90 ppm or less of lead. It cannot say it's a lead-free product or it's a no-lead product.
That's 100% correct, Ivan.
So what happens on the 17th of May, 2026, if a manufacturer's label is found not to say that?
So the regulations actually provides for fines for companies that are non-compliant, and the company head or the company itself can actually be fined according to the stipulations in the legislation.
Okay. So, Bobby, here's the question. I'm a manufacturer. I am told that by this time next year, 2025, I have to stop manufacturing product with anything more than 90 ppm lead in it. So What do I do if after this time next year, I have a huge amount of stock of product with more than 90 ppm in it? What do I do with that product? What am I expected to do in terms of the regulation?
So the regulation has kicked in from the 17th of May this year as published. So in reality, they are giving us 2 years to become compliant with stock in the market. So it is very important for manufacturers to take heed of that. From the 17th of May this year to the 17th of May in 2026, you actually have a 2-year timeline according to the Department of Labor to be lead compliant. You can't actually wait for the last minute to be compliant. And it won't be looked on kindly by the department, I think, in my view, of giving any relaxations, etc. So it is actually very imperative for companies to start their lead compliance journey from this year to ensure that by 2026, May 2026, they've consumed all of the product that they have in their warehouses or made alternative plans to dispose of those products that are no longer compliant. Because the legislation is quite clear, after 17th of May 2026, you cannot sell these products into the South African market.
So if we can just be clear for a moment on what happens on that June 2026, after that 24-month deadline is passed, what happens with stock which is on a shelf or stock that I have in my warehouse? What am I actually expected to do with that stock?
As the regulation stands at the moment, you are required to remove that stock because those products are now class 1 hazardous product according to the regulation. And those products are not allowed to be sold via retail or any other means in the country. So you'll have to remove it and dispose of it accordingly.
Okay, I cannot repurpose it.
As long you can repurpose it as long as the lead content is less than 90 ppm in the resultant repurposed product.
All right, and that really talks to testing. But just before we talk to testing, I'm really going to ask you as an expert in the sector, Bobby, is it possible to repurpose paint that has more than 90 ppm in it? In other words, to extract that lead even further so that it falls under that 90 ppm threshold or not?
To my knowledge, no. The 90 ppm lead uh, is actually only there to cater for naturally occurring lead. Lead is a natural element, and it will be found in natural ingredients like fillers and extenders and other natural pigments. So that is why the limit is set at 90 ppm to cater for what is naturally occurring as an element, not for the added lead that we add as manufacturers in terms of lead-based dryers, lead-based pigments, and other lead-based additives.
So I guess then the message to members of SAPMA is this. Strategically, you should be saying that by February of 2025, you should have already stopped your manufacturing of anything more than 90 ppm, so that by the 17th of May 2026, you can have lag time to actually get rid of that stock either in retailers or in the warehouse. Is that correct?
That is correct. As I said, the earlier you start on your lead compliance journey, you have 2 years. The better state that you actually will be in to deal with it. So the timeline that you've given is 100% correct. If manufacturers can adhere to that, it does put them in a much better state.
And Bobby, let's talk about retailers, because retailers will have bought this stock in. It may be slow-moving stock, particularly if consumers become savvy about this notion of 90 ppm and less. And the retailers are going to almost find it impossible, certainly in the last 10 months, 10 to 6 months of that last 24-month period, to actually sell that stock. And the question I've got, and I know it's an unfair question to you because you're a manufacturer, but do the retailers have recourse to the manufacturers should they have surplus stock that they cannot move?
I think the Department of Labor has deliberately set the regulation the way it has, so as to force compliance throughout the supply chain, right from the manufacturer to the retailer in there. Their argument has always been that the consumer doesn't know any better. So because as a retailer, you cannot retail this paint post May 2026, they are putting the onus onto the retailer to ask and pull from the manufacturer lead compliant paint. And if they know the stock is going to last them more than 2 years or whatever time frame beyond the lead compliance, then they're asking the retailers to manage their stock and to pull and to put pressure onto the manufacturers to be lead compliant sooner so that they can actually meet those deadlines as well. And so the department, although it is quite onerous, has done it very deliberately to ensure very quick compliance and compliance pull through from retail into manufacturing and manufacturing into the supply base as well for lead compliant technologies. I do recognize it's a very short time frame, but it's a time frame that that can be achieved if all parties actually act together.
I would imagine that if I'm a retailer, I say to my suppliers that post May 2025, I don't want anything that is over 90 ppm, and I need by at least January of 2026 to have properly labeled product in my store.
Yes, that's 100%. Retailers can actually do that and work with the manufacturers that they stock to ensure that their stores are lead compliant by those particular dates, and no stock coming in is potentially going to sit post those dates, which may warrant a recall from both the retailer and the manufacturer.
So what are the requirements in terms of this gazette and this regulation now for testing of product?
So the Gazette or the regulation has made provision for various test methods that are recognized for lead compliance. It's listed in one of the annexures. And it does require that manufacturers test according to these methods and declare their lead content. The way I understand the regulation, a company can do it themselves if they have the capability to do it, they have the right laboratories, etc., or they can go to third-party outsourced laboratories and have it tested as long as that laboratory has the capability as well. That is one of the differences that have been made from the first lead regulations that was proposed, where we'd all have to go to ISO-approved certified laboratories. And as SAPMA, we made quite a concerted effort to point out that there are no certified laboratories in the country, and companies, paint companies themselves over the years have invested in their own laboratories and to allow paint companies to test themselves and declare themselves using the valid test methods as stipulated in the regulation.
And would those be SANAS accredited laboratories, even if they're internal, or not necessarily?
Not necessarily. I think if you are an ISO-approved company, you will have ISO methods that cover your laboratories as well. So based on what I've read in the regulation, it is not asking for SANAS or ISO 17025 approved laboratories. It's asking for the test method to be used to be the appropriate test method.
There's a standard on test methodology in relation to lead, isn't there?
Yes, there are various methods that can be utilized. It's up to the laboratory to determine their capability and which method best represents their product and their capacity in their laboratory to represent a lead content certificate.
Bobby, take me into your confidence. Why are you virtually bald? What have you been through to get this regulation through?
This regulation has been almost 10 years in the making. And the first version that was proposed from the Department of Labor would have been extremely onerous on the organizations to actually achieve, in terms of the compliance from the stipulations, regulations, the testing, the timeframes, etc. So although some of the elements in this current regulation may seem to be quite onerous, they were far more onerous before SAPMA actually got involved and presented the case from the coatings industries in terms of what it means to become compliant with regard to stock labeling, testing capability, limitations in technology, and the costs, because ultimately all the costs eventually pass onto the consumer. So making the Department of Labor aware of all of these here, we were able to work with the department to at least to get to this point of regulation that is a bit of a balance that allows better compliance from the industry.
As a consumer, I walk into a retail store. If I walk into a retail store now and I look at a label, I will know very little about lead in that product. In 2026, the 1st of June, what will I be able to see on a can of paint?
So from 2026, you should be able to see the statement where that declares from the manufacturer that this product complies to the South African lead levels of less than 90 ppm. So you'll either see it on the front or the back of the container. The regulation doesn't stipulate where it needs to be. It just stipulates that it needs to be very clear and legible and on the container for a consumer to see.
And consumers need to look out for that because that is absolutely a health consideration in terms of the work they're doing either on their own property or as a contractor to another property.
Yes, it actually is in the best interest of the consumers to be aware and ask for lead compliant products or choose lead compliant products for whatever project they're doing, whether it's related to kids' toys or not. It's the best practice that you use safe, compliant product.
And certainly to project management companies that work with paint and to paint companies that have a trade desk, I suppose the message is start with your specifications now on lead controlled paint, 90 ppm or less.
Yes, as I said, we have 2 years for compliance, and we should take full advantage of the 2 years and start specifying and including lead compliant paint in all projects going forward. It helps the entire supply chain. It helps the retail community. It helps consumers that we change to this compliant product as soon as possible.
As the Vice President of the South African Paint Manufacturing Association, which includes the suppliers who very often import raw materials into South Africa, includes the manufacturers who make the paint and other products, includes the retailers who sell the paint and other products, and also includes contractors who are members of the South African Paint Manufacturing Association. What is your message to your members?
My message to the members is to start your lead compliance journey as soon as possible. It is the right thing to do. There are various opinions about lead compliance across the industry. However, as South Africa, we've chosen to be part of the lead compliant journey, and I think it is up to us as responsible manufacturers, as well as retailers and suppliers that make up this coatings industry, to support this legislation and be lead compliant in the shortest time as possible.
Bobby Bugwandeen, you are Vice President of the South African Paint Manufacturing Association. Thank you so much for being with me on Contemporary Business.
Thank you very much, Ivor. I do appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.